But the voting has ended. As you can see, the counting has begun in Parliament. We know that not all the 275 MPs made it today to go and cast their ballots, but those who made it into the chamber have all casted their ballots. The voting has ended and counting is underway. What will be crucial here is this: if 183 members do vote and say that yes, the amendment should be done, November 7 should be the date for the general elections in the country, that will mean that this year's elections will be on November 7. That will happen. If not, if that number is not achieved, it means that the House has rejected this amendment, and that will mean that we may be heading to the polls on December 7. That will be interesting, considering that the proposed amendment was done at the Inter-Party Advisory Committee level by the political parties. They had agreed in principle that this would enable the transition process to be much more elaborate and smooth, considering the time lapse you would have in that period. So we'll see how this plays out. Today, we know that the Speaker has been on his feet, ensuring that the process is without any irregularity. We learned that the minority leader, when he casted his ballot, in fact, put up his vote, showed it to everyone, and that caught the eye of the Speaker. He had to direct them to do things in the right manner. But nevertheless, that process has ended. Voting has ended, and the counting is underway. Everyone has cast his ballot. And this all-important election dates change that's happening on the floor. 183 votes that will be needed to pass the amendment bill. If we do not get that number, that will mean that this exercise will end in us getting our elections done on December 7th for this year. Remember that the MPP were learning at a steering committee meeting yesterday, took a decision that it will be in Ghana's interest to have the elections done this year on December 7 rather than November 7. That will mean that the minority will not be in support of the amendment to be done today. We'll see whether all the members stood by this decision taken by the MPP in deciding not to allow this amendment to go through today. Even though they back it in principle, they are questioning the timing, saying that it is not right. That should not happen in this year's elections. We'll see how this plays out. And you can see there on your screens the counting happening. This is what will ordinarily happen in any election. The ballots will be taken out of the box, sifted, and those for yes amendment should happen will be piled on one end. Those who are not for the amendment will be piled on the other, and then we'll see how many votes go in any direction in this important process. So just by way of information, the total number of voters in Ghana's parliament is 200, and the number of voters, I mean the MPs in parliament today, are 275. I must indicate that not all of them made it today in parliament, so that will mean that the numbers will not be clearly for all 275. You may see a reduction in the votes that will come out today. 183 votes from the MPs are required. In all of them saying yes, that will mean the amendments will happen today. If not, it means it will be rejected. NDC has 158 members. That's the majority, but it does not translate into an automatic win in this amendment if they all have to vote in this. And we have already been informed that not all of them indeed made it to the House today. The vote of the minority MPs in this amendment is key because, as I mentioned, the NDC do not have the 183 votes. They need 30 more from the minority to make this amendment possible. The minority, they've already indicated in the debate, in the prelude to the voting process, that they agree with the bill in principle, but are against it because of its timing. That will play a major role in how the votes will play out after the counting is done. They say that compromise is required, and I'm sure that for all these processes, there will be some compromises requested on the other side of the House to ensure that this amendment is done. The minority, rather, today in their debate were demanding that focus must rather be on the Presidential Transition Act, which is already in place, should help with the transition. They're saying that's more important than, in their view, a change in dates, because that alone does not guarantee a smooth transition. They need two-thirds majority to get this amendment possible. We'll see if the minority hands them lose 30 votes, or they will stick to their guns and ensure that this amendment does not go through, especially looking at the elections we have in our hands in this year for the presidential and parliamentary polls. Also on the floor today, the issue of finances for the Electoral Commission was one of the key reasons why the minority feels strongly that this amendment will not be important in this year. Rather, subsequent elections, it can be considered. We know that the counting, the sifting is done. All the votes have been pulled out. We're seeing the clerks of parliament busy with those ballots that have been counted and sifted out of those boxes. Remember, this was a secret ballot, and so you will not know which MP voted in which direction, but you will know per the numbers. If it goes in the way of an amendment being accepted, that will mean that some minority members change their mind at the last minute to back this. If it stays the same 122 or more than the number 183 not going for the amendment, then we'll see this whole exercise end up in us not having November 7 as that date for our election. So as you can see, the clerks busily pulling the papers, sifting them one after the other, making sure that the process is done transparently and that in the end questions are not raised about the credibility of what's happened in Parliament today. Remember that these individuals, these members of Parliament, represent us as a country in taking this important decision. Whichever way it goes, it would have grave implications for this year's elections. Remember that the political parties have had their own say on this matter. At the Inter-Party Advisory Committee meeting, they were clear in their minds that November 7 should be the date for the elections to be held, both presidential and parliamentary. But we also know that the NPP had raised some issues about this in the past, raising questions about the EC's preparedness to have elections done on November 7. We'll see whether that will play out today in the votes that have been cast today in Ghana's legislature. Right, so as you saw, it looks as though the counting is done. The results will be declared in just a moment. We'll bring you that live declaration of the results for this all-important election date amendment, the constitutional amendment being done in Parliament today. We've kept our eyes there since morning when the entire debate started up until the minute where voting began. Now it's ended. The counting is also done. We'll see whether we'll have November 7th to hold, the amendments passed, or the minority's position in not allowing this to pull through, whether that wish has been granted by the votes that have been cast today in Ghana's legislature. Remember that for this all-important process, 183 votes.
The ayes, 125. Noes, 95. Other members, Article 291, Clause 3 requires that Parliament needs at least the votes of 2/3 of all members of Parliament to approve the bill at the second reading stage. And that 2/3 is 184, because the 2/3 of 275 is 183.3333 recurring. And therefore, the Constitution Amendment Bill 2016 is rejected at the second reading. Other members, it's past 4 o'clock. The adjournment of the House is at my pleasure. But I'll find out from the Honorable Majority Leader if he has anything to say. Honorable Minority Leader. Honorable Minority Leader, do you have anything to say? Speaker, not really. Except to express profound appreciation to honorable members for the exercise that we've just gone through. And having said that, to also remind members that tomorrow at 8:30 in the morning, we may have to be at the forecourt to mourn with the family of our departed colleague, the Honorable Yafi Pepra. Speaker, thank you. Honorable Majority Leader. Mr. Speaker, I beg you that we adjourn. Even though it's at your discretion, I think that we should adjourn. I don't have anything to say.
All members, on that note, the House is adjourned tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the forenoon. Thank you very much.
Right, so prior to those that have been cast today, it looks as though the 183 that was needed to push the amendment has not been achieved today. That will mean that the amendment bill has been rejected. For the minority, this will be a victory for them, but for the Attorney General and the majority in Parliament, they will be the unhappy party in all of this. Let's start getting some reactions on what has been a very interesting day in Ghana's Parliament. We can speak to the campaign manager for the MPP, Peter McMahon. He joins us now on the line. Good afternoon to you, sir. Thanks for joining us. All right, it seems we've lost him on the line. We'll try and re-establish contact with him. But we know already that the MPP had made it clear after the steering committee meeting that the minority should not approve this amendment, which was to be done today. In fact, the debate was supposed to have happened yesterday. That was deferred to today. And after proceedings, it's clear. The breaking news is that the amendment bill, which was to change the election date, has been rejected. Why? Because the 183 votes needed to push through this amendment was not achieved. The minority voted against it. Some 93 votes as against 135 were the numbers that did not make it. And as you heard the Speaker mention, live in Parliament today, after the counting and the balloting was done, it's clear that the amendment bill has been rejected by the House. This would have some implications for what happens. First of all, the elections for this year will be held on December 7th and not on November 7th had been earlier advertised. So we'll see 1 more month of preparations for the political parties who have been preparing for the November 7 date. That will not happen. December 7 will still remain the date for which we will have our presidential and parliamentary elections done in the country. We will hear from the political parties, because you know that at the Inter-Party Advisory Committee meeting there was an agreement that this amendment was important, it should be pushed through. The NPP was the dissenting voice, and today in Parliament they've made their numbers count. They have been able to stop the amendment from happening today. Remember, there was a fall, in fact, on this matter as well. Let's speak to Peter McMahon, the campaign manager for the NPP. Good afternoon to you, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, sir.
Right, so first of all, what do you make of the rejection of this amendment bill by Parliament today?
Well, for me, two things come up. First, I have always said that the constitution of this country is supreme. And in the constitution, it clearly says that sovereignty rests with the people of Ghana. And the people of Ghana are represented according to the Greek way of representation by our parliament. So in effect, it's the good people of Ghana who have spoken. And I think when the good people of Ghana speak, that should be it. So be it. We have always said that we are ready for November 8th and December. However, we thought that there were certain things that needed to be done. When we had the opportunity to address the Parliamentary Committee on Constitution and Legal Affairs, we made our point straight. You see, we as a party sent a memo to the Electoral Commission way back in March 2014 that we want the date moved to November so that we can have enough time for transition and for second round, if any. We sent a memo. We also took part in the IEA deliberations at Koforidua that also accepted that there should be a time in November for our election. And I took part in the handing over of the IEA report to the Electoral Commission. I stood in for MPP. But the issue is that if we send something in March 2014, does it have to wait 2.5 years before an action is taken on it? I think that Ghanaians should be mindful of the way we change electoral laws or think new ones when it's about 3-4 months to election. My brother, elections and democracy, they say, is a journey. The journey in UK began in 1872 when the first law on secret voting was enacted. Since then, many laws and amendments have taken place. The most recent one being the one that limited, or rather gave a time limit to the tenure of Parliament in UK for 5 years. Because hitherto the Prime Minister could just call an election. But when they made this new law, it had to take effect from the next election. As I speak to you, Kenya has also changed its date for election. But the Kenyans voted 10 months ago, and it will take effect 17th August 2017. If you look at electoral management bodies the world over, it is a cycle. Ghana's cycle is 4 years. At the end of the cycle, you have to do an internal review of what went on in the last election. After the internal review, you have to also engage your external stakeholders, political parties, the security agencies, the media, and get their views on how the elections went. When you get these two views, you have to take steps to do the necessary reforms. After all, every election must see an improvement over the previous one. So it is no wonder that the ECOWAS Charter on elections, governance, and democracy states that 6 months to elections, no new laws should be enacted. And Ghana is a signatory to that charter. So why is it that our electoral commission has taken all this time before it's coming to do these amendments, and it's becoming a precedent in our electoral administration that anytime they can make electoral law like they did in 2012 to change the constituency's boundaries.
Okay. Now, Mr. McMahon, what does this mean for the process going forward, especially for your party? You already made your concerns known about this amendment being good in principle, but the timing not right for the country. Where do we go from here with this process?
What do you want?
Where do we go from here with this process? What will it mean for our electoral calendar?
I started with the view that when Parliament speaks, it means the whole country has spoken, because they stand in for Ghanaians, and the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, says sovereignty rests with the people. So if Parliament has spoken, we have no option than to go with it. We are ready for the election in November or December, but once Parliament has spoken, we have to go with it.
All right, Mr. McMahon, thank you for your time this afternoon. Campaign manager for the MPP. Clearly, for the minority in Parliament today, they were clear in their voices and debates that an amendment was good in principle, but the timing was wrong, and in their view, it should not happen for this year's elections. It looks like their wish has been granted per the votes. They were able to push the 183 not to happen in Parliament today. So that's what we have for you. Your breaking news. If you're just joining us, the amendment bill seeking to change the dates for the elections for this year being November 7 has been rejected because the needed votes to push the amendment was not reached. 183, they were 183 votes to make it happen. They only got 125 MPs voting for the amendments. That's the information we have for you today. I'm sure that for the Attorney General and the majority MPs, they will not be happy because they pushed quite strongly today the reasons why this amendment was important for this year's elections. But we'll hear and get you more reactions also from the political parties who agree at the IPAC meeting that this was the way to go for the country, to have our elections held on November 7. It looks as though that will not happen, at least for this year's elections in 2016. If the amendment should happen, that may be for subsequent elections, but clearly not this one in 2016. That's the news we have for you this afternoon. We've followed this quite closely since morning here on your election headquarters. We'll bring you more reactions here on this channel as the day progresses. We'll break now and bring you sports here on the Pulse. Stay with us.